All right, Brooke, excited today to be with Jason. Brooke, I'd love to hear about how you and Jason originally got connected.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, Jason and I have known each other for a long time. I think it was back when I was working for LiveRes. We were trying to get 360 Blue on the LiveRes platform, and we were just courting him left and right. But it just was always super impressed. He always had the best stories and understood the vacation rental industry better than almost anyone I knew out there. So really excited to have Jason highlighted today on this show.
Yeah, Jason, well, welcome. Glad you're here, and thank you for taking the time with us today. We really appreciate it. Jason Sprenkle, formerly of 360 Blue, currently kind of Key Data Dashboard, I think is the main project. But I would love, if you don't mind, just a few minute overview kind of into 360 Blue, how that got going, your involvement with it, and now what you're working on today with Key Data.
Yeah, 100%. And look, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Anytime I get a chance to talk to Brooke, it's a privilege. So thank y'all for taking the time. My entry into 360 Blue, it may be unorthodox. It may be just like everybody else's. I don't know, but it was a little circuitous. I was started out as a software lawyer, got into real estate development, kind of at a time where, by luck, the condo market took off in the early 2000s. Great time to be a developer when you didn't know what you were doing, and it turned out to be lucrative for everybody. When the market changed a couple of years into that, it was no longer a great time to be a developer, and we were holding several of our own vacation rental units, and hired my brother to come take them over after I realized that the market was such that they weren't really highly customer service oriented. We had signed up our units, which were across a relatively wide area, 20 miles or so, with a couple of different vacation rental companies. And they all had these real stringent criteria. If you don't do this, or if you don't fix this, or if you don't respond within the next days, you're kicked off the program. And I thought, well, man, that's not a very customer focused approach. And so I asked my brother to run it. And it was right when kind of you could do that. VRBO had just started. Automated locks were just coming into play. And that model of you needed an office on every corner had started to fade. And so he listed our units on VRBO. We paid him a lot less than what we were going to pay those guys. And he started to add people next door. And before you knew it, we had the spreadsheets out and we're looking for software and finding folks like Brooke. And, we had a vacation rental company on our hands.
And how long was that? So I'm curious, when you first started signing other contracts to exit, what was the time frame there?
Let's see. We sold the company 4 years ago, just under 4 years ago, and we had the company for 13-ish years. So about 17 years ago we started it, I'd say.
Yeah. And during that time, you made some mistakes, perhaps, and that's what you shared with Brooke, obviously, as part of the project. So maybe let's dive into them and kind of give some background and some context about each one of them and how it related to that time frame. But before we get there, maybe a quick background about Key Data, how that got started, just so people are aware of that as well, because it's something that people should be aware of.
Yeah, I was always intrigued with the space once we had dug in, had the benefit, which we'll talk about here in a second, onto the mistakes of having a really incredible leader who took over as CEO of the vacation rental company for us. And so it freed me up to pursue other things in the space. And so we had tried our luck with a software venture several years before we sold it. It went well in the form of a company called Glad to Have You. And this was a chance to get back out. We still had the itch. We love software. We love the space. And so it was a chance to get back out and do it again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right on. Awesome. Well, let's dive into the mistakes. Excuse me. Number one, I thought was interesting on your list, Jason. This came up a few times. Accounting. So number one, accounting. Don't wait to get strong accounting. Don't wait to get a strong accounting team in place. It is the foundation of your data-driven metrics. Even when you're small, start with great accounting. Cleanup is too hard. So what was kind of the mistake you made here as it relates to accounting and keeping the book straight? And how did that later get corrected during your time there?
Yeah, I don't know how pervasive it is. I suspect it is. Accounting is not sexy. It's not something you think of as, I'm going to start out my company and the way we're going to be amazing is we're going to have some great accountants. It seems like a logistical checkbox that you just have to get to at some point. And so for me, I'm kind of what I think of as the quintessential founder who's really good at dreaming about what might be and is wanting to go fast and, conquer the world, which means I'm not really good at type A, get the stuff done that needs to be done every day. And that's certainly accounting. It was non-sexy. It was boring. It was always the thing I was going to do later. And I realized the longer the business went on that the problem grew and it compounded. And it was a difficult process to go and clean up. And now through, the benefit of having a number of different companies, particularly, a private equity backed company in the form of Key Data, and seeing what really great accounting and financials and metrics can do for a business, I wish I had that wisdom to go back and just start that business by saying, look, when somebody comes in to buy this business ultimately, or when you're trying to make decisions about how your business is progressing and how you ought to make, decisions to go left or right on a day-to-day basis, you have to have fundamental, strong accounting. That's the core of what you do, and it's just too hard to go back and do it. So I will never start a company without over accounting, so to speak, right out of the gate. It's too hard to fix, and it's too important to how you drive your business.
We see this all the time. I feel like it's like so many businesses, in this space, that's what they do. They go out there, they're so aggressive on growing and doing everything they can to get the inventory on board and then get guests. And it's like accounting becomes that afterthought, and
really
and it compounds, like you said, Jason. It's just the further along you go without it, it's just the worse off it is. But we heard it time and time again with this series. I mean, Simon Lehman had a great quote that was one of his top 10. He said, not putting enough emphasis on financial hygiene, cash flow planning, playing with trust accounting, no budgets, no forecast, and no tracking of the overall performance of the business. And then Jen Mucha with Arrive, she said that was one of her top 10 mistakes too, was not hiring someone early on in the business to ensure accounting is dialed in on a daily and weekly basis. There's, monthly makes it a big push every few weeks and creates unnecessary stress. But yeah, we heard it time and time again.
Not only does it drive your business decisions, and it should, but think about when somebody comes in to look at your business, the first thing they say is, let me see your books.
Yep.
And if they're not tight and it doesn't look like you know what you're doing, you've already devalued all the work that you've done in the business.
And it's a reflection of the rest of your business. If your books aren't tight, then everything else in your business, their assumption are everything else is a mess too.
100%.
It's kind of foundational to everything that you build on after that. So
That's
yeah,
exactly.
this came up a few times, like Brooke said already in our recordings, and I anticipate it's going to come up again because people need to kind of hear the perspective there. I like the second one here though. So let's turn the page a little bit, Jason, to branding. So branding, you're selling an experience, so lean into incredible branding early. Your brand should always make you look a little bit better than you are. I like that kind of sentiment. What did you learn here throughout your process, and how did you do that? How did you accomplish that and make yourself look a little bit better than you were?
We did everything that I think a normal vacation rental company does or small business does. We popped up a website. We came up with a logo. But we were several years into the company, and I was making logos in paint. Nobody probably even knows what paint is. But Thanksgiving would roll around, and the company used to make fun of me because I turned our logo into a turkey, and I made a snowman out of it when it was Christmas time. And it was fun, and it was okay. But as the company started to get a little bit bigger and we brought in some marketing people who had this kind of foresight that I wish I had, they immediately said, like, hey, we need a graphics person and we need an SEO person. And they started to list, we need a copywriter. And I thought, whoa, that is so overkill. Like, I've been doing it myself. And so I think truth be told is, like, I looked left for a minute, and by the time I came back in the room, we had a whole bunch of marketing people, and I thought it was vast overkill. But what I realized is they knew what they were doing, and they came in and they said, let's attack this thing. Let's have a branding guide. Let's talk about, what do we want to sound like? What do we want to smell like? What do we want to look like? And not just on our website. What do we want to look like to our employees, to our owners? What voice do we want to use, right? And let's make it all consistent. Do we want to be a fun company? Do we want to be a formal company? So they literally created this branding guide. And as soon as they put it together, my initial instinct was, we're about to waste some money on something that feels like a consultant. But when they got it together and they started to change the way our office looked, and they started to change the voice tone that we used in our emails, and they started to really change how we looked online and in blogs and stuff, then all of a sudden people were like, you guys are killing it. And we hadn't changed the business. What we had done is change how we were perceived. And what I realized is a lot of our growth came right after that, where people started to say, like, your business looks really buttoned up. And it's kind of reflective back to the accounting comment of, you better look like you know what you're doing. Even if you know what you're doing and you don't look like it, you're not going to get the kind of growth or perception from owners or guests or companies that want to work with you or employees who want to be a part of you. So I always try now to make sure that we not overspending on marketing, but marketing reflects who we want to look like to the rest of the world, and that's important for employee retention and owner retention, and least not last but not least, in the vacation rental space in particular, you're trying to draw in travelers to an experience. And if you don't look like it's going to be a wonderful experience online, then you're already behind the 8 ball before they even get through with your website.
I heard Jason say this before, and I absolutely loved it. It was such a good sentiment. And it's funny, Jason, when I first started Vintory and I actually went down to 30A, and I would talk to some of our partners down there, and I would ask them what kind of brand they were looking to build and everything else. And many of them pointed to you and pointed to 360 Blue and just the reputation that you guys had of being probably one of the top brands. And I really feel like you said it kind of, the catalyst of that came from the marketing and the image that you built. And it almost became like a self-fulfilling prophecy from there. It was a great strategy.
Yeah, I take zero credit for it. It happened around me, but I would never do it without it again.
I'm curious, Jason, this is just my own personal, curiosity out of this. I've had people say before that, when someone goes to buy the company, that they're mostly not valuing those things, that they don't value the brand, they don't value the company as much. Sure. They're mostly just taking. Did you find that was the case? Did you assign during the sales process much value to the brand, or do you think it more helped you along the way, not necessarily at the exit? I'm curious.
I think for us, it was critical. I don't know if it's critical for every small company who's doing 95% of their bookings on the OTA, but we were doing 85% of our bookings direct. We had a reputation for having a very strong brand locally and nationally. So for us, we had put enough attention into branding that I think it had a key part to our sale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right on. Awesome. Well, let's kind of go a little bit in a different direction then, from more creative to more data-driven, numbers, analytics, that sort of thing. So number 3, data. Invest in the process of gathering and simplifying the data that you need to run your business efficiently and effectively. You can't be everywhere, and there's too much to manage at any given time. So invest in a great data so you can make efficient decisions and know where your time is needed. How did you go through that process, and what data did you end up looking at the most?
Obviously, it's my favorite topic now because we got a company called I think it's also one that Brooke and I have aligned on since the day that we met, and he's had a passion for the metrics that drive our businesses. I know we talk about it now. At the time with 360, I think we struggled like a lot of people. You've got so many different software platforms that aren't necessarily connected, but I knew innately with that same kind of drive that put us into this business that if you can't see what's happening in your business in a very efficient way, you're just not going to be able to run the business the way you need to run it. And I found ourselves halfway into the business having a lot of what I call just anecdotal check-ins and meetings where we would sit down with leadership and we'd say, "How's it going?" And we'd go around the room. And by the time we got to the end of the meeting, we really hadn't made any critical decisions that were really driven by good data. We were driven by a lot of gut. And we had survived, but we were lucky enough to get a young lady named Ashley Horsley who came in and ultimately became CEO of our company. And I was always anxious for data, but she had the capacity to get down to work and get it done. And so we literally said, what are the couple of, we call them needle movers, but what are the main metrics that we need to understand how housekeeping is doing? And what's the main metrics or data points? If we only could have one or two, it would tell us how maintenance is doing. And we kind of went through the departments and we went back and we said, okay, start collecting data in a way today that we can sit down in a meeting and we can literally just have like a one pager with 20 data points. And I want to be able to see, and Ashley was the one who pulled it together, but I want to say like, oh my goodness, what's happening with housekeeping? We've got a number here for cleans done on time, and it's been above 85% for 12 weeks, and it just fell to 50%. That's where we need to spend our attention. And so it was really, I've heard quotes, and I don't have one on the top of my head, but something to the effect of like lazy people are really good at finding out the shortest way to do something. Part of it is like just being deeply efficient. Like you don't want to manage your business by running around and asking everybody how it's going. You want a cut sheet that says, here's a bunch of numbers. And I think of everything visually. So it's a whole bunch of graphs where everything's either flat or it's going up. All you're doing is looking for the red light or the one that's blinking or the one that's going down that's usually going up. And so we just found it as a way to dramatically improve how we spend our time as owners and managers of the company. We said that's where our attention is needed for the next couple of weeks. And of course, now that I've had the benefit of working at Key Data and both seeing what data can do for vacation rental companies from our perspective, and perhaps equally as important, having the benefit of some of these incredible people I work with that are building out these really robust financial packages where we're starting to track our own performance in a very meaningful way, kind of a 10x of sophistication from what we had built back in the day. I'm even more obsessed with the ability of good data to help you make good business decisions.
It sounds like scorecard from EOS, Brooke. Yeah, go ahead.
Literally, was just going to say that. This is, I mean, Jason, I think you're the only person that hasn't brought up EOS yet in their top 10 mistakes, like not implementing it. But
Yeah.
EOS, one of the core principles is their scorecard.
Yeah.
And in every level 10 meeting, you should have what are those key metrics that you should be kind of looking at. And the way they describe it is, envision you're on an island somewhere, you're sitting in a hammock, and once a week or once a day, somebody walks over to you with a cocktail and then also an index card. And on that index card are the 4 or 5 key indicators that give you an understanding of the health of your business. That's enough information you could look at and see, is the business operating healthy or not on a week by week basis.
100%.
And I thought that was a great metaphor.
Yeah, we literally have a scorecard now for our business. It's got about 8 rows on it. They're red, yellow, and green.
Yep.
I'm looking for greens. And look, there was a day where I said, all I want to know on the weekends is what percentage of cleans were done by 4 o'clock. If you can give me one number, I can figure out mostly whether the weekend fell apart or we had a great weekend by that number.
Isn't that funny? Leading indicators.
Leading indicators, that's right.
Yeah, exactly. So it's funny, maybe you didn't end up using that exact system, Jason, the EOS system, which has got a lot of praise on the show, but you kind of picked a very key part of it out and built that for yourself, and ultimately that was impactful and effective. Right on. All right, so number 4, begin with the end in mind. Find Jacoby, Ben, or Simon and understand what truly drives the value of your business. Then get up every morning and aim at those targets. So I imagine these are relating to kind of people who help with the sale process of the business. Maybe we could put some links nearby the video here where people can check out these different individuals. But what was that process like, beginning with the end in mind? When did you have that mindset, and how did it ultimately end up being helping successfully sell the business down the road?
I didn't fully have it until after we sold the business, regrettably. Which is part of the reason it's on the mistake list. Why these discussions are so helpful to others, I'm hopeful. But the idea is like, look, Jacoby, Ben, and Simon are people who've sold all the vacation rental companies that have been sold over the last 5 years, pretty much in the space. They all know this very predictable pattern of what is going to define the value of your business or the multiple of your business, right? And it's a relatively short checklist. And yet, so many of us, myself included, are building these incredible businesses, and then they wait till the day that they're ready to sell the business to say, like, oh, how am I being graded? Mm-hmm. So literally not knowing what you're going to be tested on at the end of the semester and just reading a whole bunch of stuff and hoping for the best when you can get a copy of the test ahead of time. You know what you're going to be scored on because it's out there. And so for gosh sakes, go get a copy of what the criteria is going to be for the exam so you can build your business intentionally in that direction. And, I think for so many of us back in the day, we started out with vacation rentals. I think a lot of it's kind of similar mindset for some of the B's and B's out there right now, which is kind of, it's a lifestyle company. It's fun, and these things have turned into really serious, incredible businesses, and they're getting more and more sophisticated. And so I think it's true of every business, but look, you know where you're headed ultimately. This business is going to be worth something one day. You might leave it to your kids, as I know a lot of people will, but it'll be worth something to them someday. Someday somebody's going to have the opportunity to buy this business. So whether you're building it for your kids or whether you're building it to sell 5 years from now or tomorrow, go figure out how you're going to be scored and be intentional in directing your business to maximize that opportunity.
Yeah, right on. I mean, Brooke, this came up a few times, right? And it's ultimately, I think Jason described it very well, beginning with that end in mind, and then, you can drive straighter instead of curving all around to get there, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, I absolutely love this one. I mean, it actually goes back, I think the original line was from Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I think this was habit number 2, begin with the end in mind. So no, understanding those key metrics or drivers are, what those buyers are looking for is critically important. If you can do that and then, set goals towards that, you're going to be much better. I mean, when Jason, I had the pleasure of having Jason on one of our all hands meetings, and he went over some of the key lessons he learned in building 360 Blue with the team. And, this is one of the things he talked about. It was so spot on. And I think, I'm trying to think. I think Steve Trover said something similar to this. Who said something effective like not running the company like I was preparing it for sale. Even if you have no desire to sell anytime soon or even ever, doing so will make sure you're running it in a responsible, profitable, and structured way. When it's run this way, you may never want to sell it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Build a business that you don't want to sell, right? That's the
Yeah,
one everybody's going to buy.
exactly.
We're tracking it, right? They go hand in hand. So, like, are you tracking how many properties you added every month? And you're the best at teaching us about this stuff in the industry, Brooke. But like, how many did you add? How many did you lose? What's the net of that? And how much does that? And draw those curves out. Like when somebody comes to buy the business, they're going to want to look at your chart. Start building your chart intentionally.
Well, it's funny how many partners that we've had that have sold in the last couple of years, and then they have this like bonus program for like the next 90 days or 120 days where they get a $30,000 check for every contract. So they're like, all right, Brooke, I want to go hard, man. Let's get everything we can. Let's sign up as many properties. I'm like, why weren't we doing this 6 months ago or a year ago?
Precisely. Yeah, well said.
Yeah. Food for thought for sure, Brooke. Well, let's head on over to number 5. 5, get away and think. The vacation rental business is particularly good at sucking you into the day-to-day. There's always a guest, an owner, or an employee that needs your attention. Take time away to think about what the needle movers are that could change the direction of the business and improve it. So how did you kind of do this during your time? Or did you later figure this out after? I guess I'm curious, Jason. And then how could someone make use of that time?
Some of both. Obviously, none of these would be on the mistake list if we had nailed them at the beginning. And so I think it's something that evolved. And I think it's still something like all of these where I still have to get up and look at my mistake list today to make sure that I don't make them again, and I remember what's important. But there's a lot of different ways to think about this. You can think about it as kind of from the 80-20 rule, or you can, lots of different euphemisms for attacking it. But, there tends to be a handful of things that really meaningfully impact your business. And it kind of goes back to the data points and stuff. But I don't think we spend enough time working on those things that genuinely are going to change the trajectory of your business, right? And it's hard because the vacation rental business is a game of, parts for widgets, as I like to say. Like there's always a bed to be made or an employee to talk to or a fire to put out or something to fix. And it's easy. It's very tantamount to just getting up all day and answering your email box and considering it as working really hard, right? Whereas sometimes you just need to turn off your inbox. You need to turn off the calls with owners and cleaners and guests, and you just need to work. I guess the euphemism I heard a lot is work on your business, not in your business. And so it's just, I don't think anybody's ever perfected it, but taking time out of your schedule to say, like, I'm just going to take a couple of hours. I'm either going to go for a walk, I've heard some people say, or I'm just going to turn off the noise. Or we were talking earlier about blocking off a Thursday or a Friday or half a day to just think and look at those data points and say, like, what could we do that would dramatically have effect? And so I can specifically remember we would have, retreats every so often for leadership, but I can specifically remember sitting down with Ashley and my brother one day and saying, what if we had an exercise to say we want to add $1 million to the bottom line and we want to do it in the next 6 months? And we tasked Ashley with saying, go away and think, take a couple of days off, go wherever you want, and just see if you can think of a way to do that. And she came back in a few hours and said, I know how to add $1 million to the bottom line. And she did, and we did. We changed an admin fee on the booking window, and we added $1 million to the EBITDA that year. And it was literally just because we forced ourselves to say, time out, how could we have a meaningful impact on their business? And so I've always remembered that example and said, don't forget to stop and think every now and then.
I think my perspective on this, curious your thoughts on it, Brooke, is that usually there's one small decision you make that's kind of like a domino, where if you knock it down, then like 50 other problems either get solved, or in this case, what Jason was describing, future good things happen in terms of revenue or cash flow or something. I don't know if this exact one came up, Brooke. We talked about burnout in previous recordings. This is a bit different in my opinion. It's just more of kind of that perspective. I like this though.
Yeah, this didn't come up a ton, but I like it. I mean, we, here at Vintory, we go away usually November, December every year for an offsite leadership retreat and just, turn off everything and really just kind of lay out not only the next year, but the next 3 years. And, how are we tracking, based on what we set before. And it's pretty important. And it's funny, I've gotten back into swimming recently and, I'll go out and swim. And I really enjoy it because I can't have any devices there. And it's like, I'm swimming, I'm by myself. I don't have my phone with me. I'm not even listening to a podcast for 45 minutes, just in my thoughts, and there is something to be said about doing that where you're not connected to a device for a short period of time.
Yeah, well said.
It's like meditation almost. Good stuff. Meditation and exercise all in one, which is good. Let's turn the page a bit here to number 6. Get out of the way. Find great people and get out of their way. It took me too long to get out of the way of the most amazing CEO that we found, and she taught me that if you can't get out of the way of your own team leaders, you selected the wrong leaders. What did this process look like for you, Jason?
Yeah, for me, I come at business and everything in life as kind of a quintessential people pleaser, which I used to think was an asset, but I'm becoming more and more aware that it can be a liability as well. And so I was probably very reluctant to ever assess that I had the wrong people on the team or the wrong spot in the bus. Kind of, if you go back to good to great, I was always assuming I just got to figure out a way to motivate this person or teach them, or I gotta help them more. It's on me. And so I found myself second guessing the team and talking too much in the meetings and trying to drive everything and really not delegating. I think the lesson that I saw in the shift in the way Ashley managed the team and I managed the team was she's like, you got to trust these people. You got to empower them and you got to trust them. And I said, well, so-and-so, I'm not so sure. And she's like, well, then they shouldn't be in that position. And it was an epiphany like, oh, yeah, it's so obvious when you say that. But if you stop now and you look at your own teams and you say, who do I implicitly trust on my team to go out and crush what they've been tasked to do with, and who am I holding the hand of? And it's inevitable. Every time you finally get around to making that decision and changing that one person that you thought you needed to change a year ago, you end up better for it, I found, and they end up better for it. She had an expression that clear was kind, which means like having a direct conversation with somebody where you're telling them what they need to hear, not what you think that they want to hear. It's better for them too. Like, it's kind to tell people what they can do better and to get them in the right seat on the right bus and to help make sure they're in a position where they're thriving. It's not kind to drag somebody along, hold their hand, make decisions for them and make excuses. Like, everybody wants to crush it and you want to crush it too. Like, help them get in the right spot where they're going to thrive, and it's easier for you as well. So it kind of became a don't forget to get the right team and get out of their way for me.
I feel like this one came up quite a bit, but I like that expression, clear as kind. I think that's an interesting way to think about it, right?
This is Ashley, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite quotes, it's funny, Ashley has all these quotes that I quote all the time that she doesn't even know about, but it's be comfortable with the uncomfortable. Wasn't that one of hers?
We say it all the time too. Be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah. I use it all the time. So it's great. She's got some good quotes, but yeah, I mean, I guess in general, like the delegation, was a big theme, Simon Lehman talked about that, thinking that the business won't run without the founder or owner, and therefore not being able to take a break or holiday. One needs to delegate to keep the head clear. Kind of goes a little bit back to your previous mistake number 5.
That's right.
Kevin Jones with formerly Latitude 38, he said, in an effort not to fail, I tried to involve myself in all matters, knowing everything, being everywhere, and I forgot to trust the team. Set very clear roles and responsibilities, but set expectations and goals, then hold them accountable. You can't simply do everything by yourself. And I was actually at a entrepreneurs organization, EO retreat a couple months ago, and our keynote speaker said something that resonated with me. He said, I'm kind of paraphrasing, but it was something like the width of your bottleneck in your organization is directly correlated to the amount of decision makers in an organization. If you have a small number of decision makers, you'll have to slow down decision making and therefore create a bottleneck. And ultimately, this is the number one factor that determines the ability for a company to scale, is that bottleneck. I thought that was related to this a little bit.
That's real good. I see slow decision making holding so much back,
Yep.
Better to make some decisions and be wrong on a few and fix them quickly than to get stuck on the decision. But you're right.
We have one of our core values is bias for action. Speed up, or what is it? Slow down the big decisions, speed up the rest. And there's only, like, you think about it, there's only probably 2 or 3 really big mission critical decisions you need to make in a given year, like really that make a difference. And take your time on those and think about it. Bring in your team, but then make it and commit to it. And then all the other ones, though, just act quickly. Like we have an entire culture of speedy decision making because we want to move fast.
Critical. Totally agree.
I think we did this on a previous recording, Brooke, but I think it's Bezos who has the one-way, two-way door. Like most decisions are two-way doors. So you can walk through them, no big deal. If you make a mistake, even you can just walk back through them.
Yeah,
It's
be
not the end of the
careful
world.
with the number of them. Yeah,
Yeah, and the ones that you're describing, Brooke, I think there's one-way ones, but the two-way ones probably outnumber the one-way ones by 30-1 or 40-1 or something like that. Most things, if you do make a mistake, it's not that big a deal. Just make the decision. If you need to back up, just walk back out the door and fix it. So it's a good way to think about it for sure. So number 7, let's kind of go to this one. I like this one. Prioritize, set clear company goals and priorities, and keep the list short and focused. Then get super focused on the handful of things that need your attention. I think this is a good one that kind of summarizes a few previous ones, Jason, around scorecard and data and knowing the numbers and not having 50 things, but doing a few things well, right?
Yeah, they overlap. And look, a lot of these seem very trite for like quintessential, ways to run a business, but they're on my list because these are the things that I was bad at or that were hard lessons for me to learn. And I do think that the profile that tends to make people good entrepreneurs or willing to start companies sometimes makes them bad at prioritizing, right? Like to me, as an entrepreneur with ADD, I want to go out and do everything. And I don't understand why we can't do everything. And I'm always eager to hire into it and spin my way through it, and it'll just work out in the end. And what I'm learning, particularly in my current company from a new president that we brought in and our COO that we work with, is like, we love that you want to do 10 things, Jason. These are all good ideas, but some of them are better ideas than others. And we don't have the team to do 10 of them. So we're doing 10 of them poorly. What if we pick 3 and we crushed them? And then we went to the 4th, 5th, and 6th one. And it was anti-ethical to kind of the visceral way I've approached, risk taking in business. But I've learned that it is clearly the right way to do it. That you've only got a certain amount of bandwidth, that some of these things make a bigger difference than other things. And if you really get the whole team aligned behind a couple of core priorities and you force yourself to write them down and communicate them to the team and come back and revisit them weekly, how are we doing on this? How are we going to achieve that? I mean, these are some of the kind of stuff you were talking about with EOS, but it just creates a clear path. I always felt like forever, and I'd probably go back and look at 20 years worth of business, where I felt like we were all aligned, we all had the same goals, and everybody understood them. What I'm learning now is when people force me to write them down and revisit and hold them accountable, that we weren't all aligned. I didn't even know exactly what they were until I took the time to write them down. And so for me, prioritizing starts with yourself and then clear communication to the team, but can't do it all at once. Figure out what you can do and do it well.
Yeah. I think there should be a service out there for small businesses where someone calls all your employees and be like, what's the key priorities right now? Yeah. And then like reports back to the boss, like, oh yeah, here's what all your employees thought. And you're like, what? They thought we were working on what? I think we've all had that
would be surprised, wouldn't they?
Yeah. They'd be like, they think what is important? So yeah, exactly. I think we've all been there. So we can go into number 8 then, firing owners. So this one came up more than a few times, Jason. So I guess we just love to hear your story on it. Some customers are just not worth the impact on your business, your branding, your bottom line, and most importantly, the impact on your employees. Fire the bottom yearly at a minimum. How did you end up doing this? And how did this help you after you made the mistake originally?
Yeah, I don't know if firing owners fits in the quintessential business book, but it certainly fits in the vacation rental playbook from our standpoint.
Yeah.
Because it seems anti-ethical to what you've been trying to do since you started the company, which is to get owners. And I think growing your business through inventory, as Brooke has taught us all, is probably the best way to raise the value of your company. So it's hard to go in and think about trimming that number and changing that curve. But what you realize is the old business adage of 80-20 that we alluded to before. Like, you've got owners that are not good fits for your company, inevitably. And you got owners that are eroding your brand. And you've got owners that are wearing you out, and more importantly, your employees out. And when you stop and you get your employees together and make a list, which is what we did one year, we said, like, let's go in and look at the ROI for each property. And we spent too much time trying to figure out, how do you figure out the ROI per property? Well, how do you allocate marketing costs and maintenance costs? It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to really figure out the ROI. What you got to figure out is directionally, is this property making us money or is it killing us, right? And what we found is when we combine some of the raw data of like the revenue that house is making versus the expense, and then you factored in the kind of cost to your team, like they hate this owner. This owner calls them 1,000 times a day, or they yell at them. Like, it's just not worth it. And so it became incredibly easy for us to go through and say, like, these 15 properties, or nobody in the room thinks that they're a good idea. And then there's a couple that are like, oh, that one makes us 300,000 a year, but everybody hates that person. Like, how can we improve it? Why don't we have a clear conversation with that owner about how we can work together better, and then see if it improves, set some expectations. And so there was a couple in the middle there, but we started doing it, and we did it like 3 years in a row. And we did it in a pretty big way. Like, we cut 20% of our inventory,
Wow.
which is scary. And the next year came around and we cut 20% more. And the next year came again, we cut 20% again. And it was the best decision we've ever made for our company, because it tightened up the morale of the employees. It tightened up the brand. It improved the customer experience. It got rid of that house where we're like, God, that house is always broken. The guests are always unhappy. And it just made it easier to run our business. And as soon as we did that, we found ourselves freed up to go add new properties, and better properties came to us. And it was very meaningful for us in particular in that we were trying to shift from an all things company to a luxury brand. And so part of the cut for us was to cut people who didn't fit that luxury brand and do it in a kind way. But it helped us refine the brand. And when we tightened the brand, then all of a sudden people are like, oh, you guys have all luxury inventory. Can we get on your program? And we'd say, well, we'll evaluate the house. And so it was a great process for us. We didn't do it until kind of the last quarter of the life of our company. I wish we would have done it before.
And Brooke, maybe an example of like slowing down to speed up, right? Like, got to get done with you, and then the acceleration is actually better, right?
Yeah, I mean, this was a whole chapter in the book. This is chapter 7. But yeah, I mean, it reminds me of Jack Welch, former CEO of GE, was pretty famous for always firing the bottom 10% of his managers every year. And Jason, I used to do the same thing. We would, and I've told this story multiple times, but we would bench rank our properties in 3 different categories every year, and with margins to the company, kind of the guest complaints / maintenance tickets. And then we would create kind of a scoring system for owners, like our PETA factor, our pain in the ass owners. And if we ever had a property that was all 3 in red, we would get rid of them. We wouldn't renew their listing every single year. No questions asked. If we had 2 out of 3, we'd have a discussion about it, but there was a high probability we wouldn't renew that one either. And that did make a difference, because look, nothing will sink your business faster than picking up a high percentage of just PETA owners, or disgruntled owners. They're going to drain your energy. They're going to distract your focus, discourage your team. I mean, those toxic owners, they really do steal energy from your teams. And what ends up happening is you end up having turnover in your teams, and that's obviously, you can't have that. And just to your point, Jason, you talked about the 80-20 rule, but I think it's more of like the 95-5 rule. I mean, you could have, there's 1 or 2 owners that just drain your team. I mean, to the point where they're ready to quit, where that's all they think about is that uncomfortable call they have to have with that one owner when the other 100 owners or 500 owners are really good.
Well said.
But this came up a lot. So Jody Taylor of Fosco said, do not wait too long to fire an owner. If you're feeling frustrated with them, so are your employees. If anyone is badgering your staff and has unrealistic expectations, cut them loose. You're better off, and they may be too.
Yeah, and look, if you want a rule of thumb, if they're on your list to where you're wondering whether or not you should let them go, let them go.
Yeah.
Just let them go. Yeah.
Just let them go.
I think Lino had a good one last week. He said, what do you say, Brooke? He was like, just refer them over. We send them a friendly referral over to our competition.
Yes.
It was kind of the way, the way he described it. And he said it in a nice way where, like, I thought he was kind of being nice, and I'm like, oh no, you're actually being very rude. But he's he's a nice guy to talk to. So he makes it seem nice. Number 9, budgets and goals. Have clear, well-defined monthly goals and objectives. You don't have to be cost conscious or profit focused out of the gate, but you have to know where you're going, how to measure it monthly. It's the only way to keep yourself and your team accountable and focused on the right things. We've talked about focus and having a specific list, but I don't think we've talked about budgets. Maybe that piece of it. I'd love to kind of hear your perspective on how you ended up doing that throughout the process and mistakes you corrected later on.
It's interesting. So we probably ran the company at least until Ashley got there with no budget. Which is really fun. It just wasn't. It just wasn't a great way to build a business. It took us a long time to build a business that we could have built faster. So we didn't have an expectation of where we were going to be at the end of the year. We didn't have an expectation of how much money we were going to make or lose. And to some extent, I think there's some room for that in your first year or two where you don't have enough properties or revenue to really overthink it. So don't get caught up in that. You need some critical mass. But we went way past that. And then Ashley got there and said, where the hell is the budget? And we immediately put a budget in place. And it was a great exercise. It helped us forecast. It helped us think about where we were going to kind of end up. But I don't know that we really drove the business hard to meet those goals and budgets. And I juxtapose that with the situation we're in today where you're private equity backed and you got this big financial package and you have budgets and goals and metrics for everything. And so we get up in the morning on Tuesday and want to know how much better we are than we were yesterday, right? And there's a number that tells us that. And so there are really clear goals. And to some extent, as you reach the end of a month or the end of the quarter or the end of the year, there's some stress that comes from we've really got to perform. But look, it allows you to drive an incredibly better business in a very shorter time frame and to be really, really focused on what matters. Like when you know that you're going to sit across the table from some really bright people who are counting on you, whether that's your friends or your wife or your husband or a board of directors or private equity or whoever, yourself, and say, we said we were going to be at X in June and we're 20% short of that. How are we going to get there? And you have a meeting to go back and say, what can we do to get to there? And you hold yourself accountable, then you just get there faster. You get there better. Versus if you're doing what my brother and I did for a few years, which is have a good time and high five and, hope for the best and see where the business lands. It sounds trite, but I think picking the right spot that meets your drive is important. But the further you can get away with down that continuum of being really focused on clear goals for everything, the better business you're going to build, I think.
So, all right. So here's a guy that's had 2 nice exits, with 2 businesses, and 3 of his top 10 mistakes revolve around data, goals and metrics, and accounting and KPIs. I think there's a common theme here, Jason. You got 30% of your mistakes revolve around this.
Yeah. Exactly.
Number 9 is kind of the perfect combination of 1 and 4, which is
Yeah.
accounting and begin with the end in mind, which is the budget basically, which is accounting, finances, and begin with the end in mind. How much are we gonna come in?
And Jason, you're not really a accounting guy though, right? I mean, that's not you obviously aren't a CPA or anything. That really wasn't your background. You're an attorney for Christ's sake,
Yeah. Yeah. I've realized late in life the power of, having some real clear financial goals and metrics, and it just gives you the ability to pick a couple of things out, focus on those really well, hold yourselves accountable and crush it. Versus if you look back over this career and you're like, we were worried about so much. And when we look back in the end, there was a couple of things that was important. And if we just would have written them down and focused on them and gone after them, everything else would have been somewhat noise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It would have been simpler.
Yeah. And ultimately, like we were saying earlier too, if you're keeping things simpler, everybody can go faster, not just the leadership, but everybody in the team can know where you're going, which is ultimately
100%.
valuable.
Yeah, well said.
All right, so number 10 here, owner communication, bring it home on this one. This one did come up a few times, but I'd love to hear your perspective on it. What you put in here, Jason, you can never have enough owner communication. You build trust and relationships with open, honest, transparent, and frequent communication. I think those are great words. There's very little that can't be cured with great owner communication. So this one did come up quite a bit. I'm curious your evolution here, maybe from the mistake that was made, and then how did you kind of improve things later on with the company?
Yeah, well, the opposite of letting bad owners go is retaining good owners, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's how you build a great business. I think even more so than guests, not to say that guests are fungible, but you build happy owners and you got the vast majority of the hard work done on a vacation rental business, and it takes care of marketing and branding and all that in the end. And what I found is when I look back and I would assess why we had an owner churn our platform, 9 out of 10 times it was failure of communication. It was, if I could have gotten to that owner before they made the decision to terminate and I could have had a conversation, I think they would have never left us. And so but as we got towards the later kind of second half of our business, we were making a list of every single owner, when's the last time somebody talked to them, how much revenue they have. And look, we still do it with our business right now. I mean, we've got dashboards that say this person brings in this much money for us and we haven't talked to them in 30 days or 60 days or 90 days and we haven't had a clear communication. Silence creates this incredible void for owners to worry about things that aren't worth worrying about. They all have some perception that their neighbor's making twice as much money, or their neighbor's more occupied, or last year was doing better than this year, or they heard on the street that things were going bad, or whatever. They get all these thoughts in their head that can simply be cured by a conversation. And I think 2023, more than any year since I started in the vacation rental space, is the year where they're most warranted. Because if you look at kind of ADR and occupancy and revenue for the last 15 years, it went up really, really, really predictably all the way until last year. And then it started to come down from its peak a little bit. And it's still way, way, way higher than it's ever been, except for last year. But you've got owners who they're seeing a decline. And so if you're not explaining what you're doing about it, putting it in relative context to where it means historically, and just having a conversation with them about you understand it, you're aware of it, you're proactive, and here's how they're doing relative to everybody else, they're just going to assume, seems like things are going bad, they may not be having a good year, we're going to try somebody else out. So I think there will be a lot of owners that change property management companies at the end of this summer. Mm-hmm. And I think the ones that are most likely to change hands are the ones where the owner hasn't been communicating very openly and honestly. And then the last thing I'll say is I think there's always been this underlying sentiment that I've heard of, like, we don't want to talk to the owner too much. We don't want to tell them a whole bunch of data. We don't want to explain RevPAR to them. We don't want to talk about what's happening with supply and real estate prices, because A, it's going to take me a lot of time to talk to them, and B, it's going to invite more questions. If you're afraid to call your owners and have an honest conversation about what's going on and build a level of trust, then you're just in the wrong business, and you're not going to create the kind of connections that I think drive this business. The owners that I've seen out there, some of the names you mentioned that have been on your podcast already, are some of the best people in the industry at creating genuine, heartfelt connections where they're not blowing smoke up anybody's ass. They're getting on the phone and telling people exactly what they know and what they don't know. And they're being transparent about it, and they're building a level of trust that is, I think, quintessential to kind of the foundation of a vacation rental business. These people are handing you a $500,000 house or a $10 million house and saying, we trust you with this house. If they don't trust you implicitly, that relationship's not going to work.
We see this as one of the biggest reasons why people churn, and leave a rental program. It literally, when you do it, it comes down to like three things. It's like, right, money, it's like the maintenance of the home and the upkeep of the home, and it's communication. And that communication came up all the time. As Rob Holderness on my team says, in the absence of information, people fear the worst.
That's exactly right. And you'll get a bill, and it'll be for $200.
Yeah.
In these PMSs, you only get 8 characters to be able to explain your $200 bill. So there'll be a miscommunication. I thought you charged me $200 to change the remote and the batteries. No, we put a TV in, and we only billed you a fourth of the cost because we forgot to talk to you about it. It's simple things.
Yep. This came up time and time again. Just a couple other people that highlighted. I'll just highlight real quick. Brian Olson, he said that was one of the greatest problems was not having that owner communication plan to communicate with owners. Tom Goodwin with Mountain Laurel Chalets, in the hustle and bustle of running a busy company, I've not always put enough emphasis on proactively and regularly communicating with homeowners. And then Lino, again, don't underestimate the importance of proactive communication to owners, even if it's bad news, just to your point, Jason.
Yeah, this one has come up a few times, I think, on everyone so far. And it's ultimately something that is pretty solvable. It doesn't actually take even a lot of intellect or skill. I think that's one on this list, Jason, that pretty much anyone can do. If you can be friendly and be, honest and straightforwardly communicate, I think you'd end out a good spot for sure. So I think we've got one more question for Jason, don't we, Brooke, about him and his perspective in his career so far.
We do. All right, Jason. So if you could go back and give your 25-year-old self any advice, what would it be?
25. Man, I think it's probably to just trust your gut on your ability to treat people really well and try to deliver really great service, and know that you don't have to know exactly what all your competitors are doing. You don't have to worry about all these concerns you have about risks to the business and all that stuff. Some of them come true, but for the most part, if you get up and you try hard and you show up and you treat people well, from owners to employees to vendors to maintenance people who stop by, that all that stuff will add up. And then in the end, you got what is, in my estimation, a pretty easy path to building a good business. And that you don't have to obsess over all the details and the risk. What you need to obsess over is staying true to that, right? Like just get up and take care of people. And particularly in the vacation rental business, I think you'll end up with a hell of a business. And then, the second part specific to the vacation rental business is, I wish I could go back and say, hey, these vacation rental businesses are great businesses. So starting day one, treat it like it's going to be a great business, not like it's a fun business while you look for something really serious to do. And I didn't give the businesses themselves the credibility that they deserved. I thought, oh, I'm a lawyer. What am I doing running a vacation rental business? And I realize now, you're a lawyer, you're working for the man, and the day you stop, your paycheck stops. When you're building a vacation rental business, you're working for yourself, and you're building a hell of a business. It can be worth a lot to you and a lot of people, and so treat it as such.
That's well said. Isn't it funny that all this private equity is coming in this space, all the smartest people in the room, and they're coming in this space, so they see it too. So
yeah, I wish I would have seen that back then.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jason. We really appreciate your time today. We'll put a bow in this recording for right now. And your 10 mistakes, I guarantee you there's people out there that can learn from it and learn from what you've done and still learn from you today and learn from what you're doing now with Key Data. So people should check that out. We'll put links nearby wherever this recording happens to be, where people can learn more about what you're doing and the background that you have. So we thank you. And we'll catch everybody here on the next one.
Thanks,
Jason.